Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and, with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Welcome to Nightlight, everybody. So glad you could join us tonight and spend some time with us. I promise this evening is a special one. At least it is to me, and I'm pretty sure it will be to all of you as well. I want to first thank Ken Quiet Hawk for his amazing introduction. As always, I feel that his work is work that needs to be remembered and recognized and experienced. You can find him at nativestorytellers.com. The Native Americans, the First People, whatever term is most appropriate for them at the moment, and I never know which to grab onto, had a way of preserving their history and their spirituality and sharing it with generation after generation after generation, and Ken Quiet Hawk and his wife continue to do that. So please take some time, go to nativestorytellers.com and check out all of the material they have there. It truly is amazing. And, you know, sometimes you use their stories in place of bedtime stories. Certainly they're happier than the grim fairy tales for sure. And help your children understand that there is a natural spiritual element to our history that they haven't been taught, and they should be. So I'll get off that soapbox. And also, if you enjoyed tonight's show, as the other shows that we do, please go to YouTube and subscribe to our channel. Mark and I are trying very hard to sort of build our following, and we would love to have you as part of our following. So tonight's show is very special for me because this is a lady that I admire greatly and am always enlightened and thrilled to be able to talk with her about her work. Dena Merriam is the founder and convener of the Global Peace Initiative of Women, bringing spiritual resources to address critical global challenges such as conflict, social justice, and ecological scarring of the earth. Over the years, she has worked to bring greater gender balance and balance between the Abrahamic and the Dharmic-based religious traditions for a more inclusive interfaith movement. In 2004, she received the Niwano Peace Prize for her interfaith peace efforts. She is the author of one of my most favorite books, My Journey Through Time, a spiritual and memoir of life, death, and rebirth. And if you have not read this book, please put it on your list. She takes you on a journey through 7 incarnations of her spirit. And she doesn't tell a story, she lives it with you. It is the most amazing experience ever, and each lifetime as you get to the end, you don't want her to die again, but you know there's something next coming. But it was a book that I highly recommend. I've read more than once, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Now, just published is The Untold Story of Sita, an empowering tale of our time. We're going to be talking about this book tonight, and again, I encourage you to read this story and become enlightened to another level, to another degree. The Untold Story of Sita replaces the traditional narrative of Sita's life as told in the Ramayana with Sita as she truly is, an incarnation of the great Devi Narayani. Sita comes to Earth to join Sri Ram in setting the foundation for a new civilization at a time when humans are becoming separate from the natural world. She seeks to embed a great love for forests and rivers, plant and animal life in the hearts and minds of the people, and to share the high spiritual accomplishments of the great women, rishis, and sages, many of whom you meet along Sita's journey. This is a story of a woman's wisdom, courage, and strength, her love for the manifest and unmanifest worlds, and her selfless sacrifices for the welfare of all. So step into Sita's time and see what life was like during a more spiritually, more advanced age, when there was an understanding of Dharma, not just as a duty, but as an alignment with the higher forces of love that make possible the preservation of our world. It's a story that took place thousands and thousands of years ago. And what's so amazing is it applies to today as well. And so that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So welcome to the show, Dena. I'm so thrilled that we get to talk again.
Well, thank you, Barbara. That was a wonderful introduction. You laid out many of the themes that I hope we can touch upon tonight.
I think that the stories that you tell, not stories, really, the experiences that you relate to people through your books are a reminder of, first of all, other times, but I think one of the most exciting parts of this book especially is that it is the reminding of a cycle that humanity has gone through before, and we're going through it again.
Exactly. I mean, we're at a stage now where we have to make an evolutionary leap, and we're transitioning from a certain kind of a civilization that's actually just not working anymore and not suitable for a higher consciousness into a new type of society that's more awakened. And the transition is painful, and we don't see exactly where we're going, what's coming next. And looking back into Sita's time, it was a similar kind of transition. They were moving from a forest society into an agricultural society, which was a big shift for the human species, actually, to form towns and cities and organize society, institutions, migrations, movements of people. It was a huge, huge shift from what existed before. But there was also a forgetting of the relationship with the deities, of the aliveness of the whole natural world. And so at the same time, you had this beginning of a material civilization. You had a separation and a loss of spiritual knowledge. So now we're standing at another juncture, and we have to, decide: are we going to make the leap, or are we going to be able to shift our society in ways that will help us survive and thrive?
Well, I think one of the important things about this journey is that it takes place, the Bible stuff goes back before the flood and stuff like that, and you have a Christian stories that are very different from the beginning of life as we know it. And this story is just, it resonates so much more to me that, the archaeologists and all of those scientists, talk about how there were hunter-gatherers and there were Neanderthals and stuff like that. But the reality is, and I have always believed, that there was an amazing culture here on this planet that was so much more evolved, and they weren't. They weren't, cave people with their knuckles, dragging on the ground.
Exactly. There's just a lack of archaeological evidence, and so they make assumptions. In time, things are destroyed. There are earthquakes. There are, tsunamis. Things get destroyed, and life just continues. Time just continues marching on, and so we don't have a lot of material evidence, but the evidence is kept in the narratives. I mean, the narratives. It's the library of the human race. These stories. You talked about how the Native Americans kept their stories alive through an oral tradition. It was the same thing in India. I mean, I was saying to somebody the other day that they didn't need writing because the mental capacity was such. The Vedas were an oral tradition for thousands of years. They were tombs and tombs, and people recited them orally. They didn't need to be written down for a long time until people lost that ability to recite them, to memorize them. But there was so much that was transmitted just through the oral tradition in this higher age.
I think you see this same type of a cycle, not to this extreme, but with the Druids. The Druids in European history, they would take those that had excessive memories, children that demonstrated they had, better memories, and they would teach them the plants. And this was before written history, and so it was those with the minds that were able to remember and repeat, and the healing aspects and the healing plants and the medical abilities of them, before written history, were amazing. And then when the Romans came in, they brought written language, and so you didn't need to have that memory anymore. But because we have all evolved through time, because we are eternal spirits on a human journey, so to speak, isn't that memory embedded within our DNA to some point? Because maybe that's why your story resonates so deeply to me, that it is something that I'm not just entertained by it, but I remember it.
Exactly. No, I think it is retained. Just like the memories of our previous births, they're in our kind of mind body somewhere, but not in our awake consciousness, because it would be too overwhelming to remember everything.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that there are moments when things come up. It's like, when you need some information, it comes forth. How you recognize a person, or you remember a certain something. But I think that certainly these, and they're in all the traditions. I mean, the Garden of Eden story, in my mind, is a memory of this higher age, where you didn't have to sow the land because everything was plentiful. There was food everywhere. There were wild grains, there were wild vegetables, wild roots. Everything was just plentiful in the forests. And so you didn't need to cultivate the soil. There was a harmony within the natural world. So I think all cultures have this memory of a time when there was a much greater harmony, and where the human being was just integrated into the natural world, and everything we needed was there.
Well, I think the other thing that really resonates to me, I'm an animal person, so that I really believe that the plants and animals communicate with us. It's just that sometimes you don't take the time to listen and to know.
Yeah, well, that was very present in the Sita book, and I mean, as I was writing this, I was really back in time experiencing it. So I was I consider myself to be a scribe. I was just recording what I was seeing, what I was experiencing, but I saw that Sita knew all the plants. She knew what their qualities were. She knew what what they could address within the human body. And it wasn't just the medicines, it was food that people ate. There's certain herbs that helped with certain qualities that you needed. If you needed to rebalance certain parts of your body, there were foods that would address those issues. then the animals, there was telepathy. There was an
Uh-huh.
exchange of visual images. So it wasn't necessarily in words, but it was through images that humans and animals could communicate.
Well, I
Pictures,
think
you know.
that's something that anyone who is an animal communicator today, the dog whisperers and the horse whisperers and everybody who whispers to their pets, understands that they don't communicate in words, but they do communicate in pictures. And
right.
It's really it's a matter of getting into that alpha state of theta, because that's where they live, and just sending the picture and you get information. It's so phenomenal. And this book it was, I can't remember how many thousands of years ago, but it takes you back before the last ice age. So, and that was about 10,000 years ago. So, it takes you back to a time, and of course the ice age, was a very lengthy, time and season.
It was a gradual, the glaciers began to melt. That's the flood that everybody remembers. As with the melting of the glaciers, over a period of time, I don't know, it could have been 1,000 years. I don't know. The oceans rose 400 feet. So, the land bridge that connected North America and Russia, through which the Native American people came, that was all submerged with the melting of the ice. And many land masses were submerged. That was probably the time that Atlantis went under. So it was we've experienced this climate change before.
Well, I think that's what so many people don't realize. Although it is coming more and more and more into public record, if you will. Astrologers talk about the progression of the equinoxes being a 26,000-year cycle. In your book, you're talking about a 23,000-year cycle. I was it 23,000? 24,000. So they both, to me, seem to be about the same thing, as far as consciousness and understanding and going from the material to the spiritual and back and forth. And this is, people say there's climate change and stuff like that. Well, yeah, it is, but we're not going through anything that we haven't gone through before. It's just been thousands of years.
What's tragic now is the desecration and pollution of the earth. It's what we've done to the soils. It's what we've done to the ocean. It's the fact that we've so separated ourselves from the natural world that we don't think of the natural world as being alive. We don't think of rivers as being consciousness. We just think of it as a place you can just put your garbage. You can just put your sewage into it. And so, to me, that's the tragedy of we've kind of in this long process of separating ourselves from nature, which began, after Sita's time, we've reached kind of the pinnacle now. We're so separate that we just regard everything else as objects that we can abuse and do as we please, without realizing that in hurting that we're hurting ourselves. We're not separate from it.
I know, and it gets to the point where. Along many years ago, and I can't remember, they all seem to flow together. So many years ago, there was a new book, and that's in quotes. You can't see me going quotes in the air, but that's air quotes, to a new process called earthing. And I laughed when I read it, because they were talking about this is a new thing we've just discovered, that if you take off your shoes and if you walk on the earth and you do it long enough, your heartbeat will resonate with the heartbeat of the earth. And you have to remember that, the Indians didn't have arthritis and stuff like that because they were more apart and in harmony with the earth. And I'm thinking, you're saying you think this is new? I mean, I know
it's very bizarre. It's very bizarre that we've come to the place that we now have to rediscover our connection to the earth. And in the earlier times, and I think this is true in all cultures, not only was there an understanding of the deep connection, but there was a love. There was a kind of like a love exchange There was a love for the forest, a love for the earth, the soil, the rivers, and that's, I think, what we awaken in ourselves. We have to awaken that sense of awe and love for all that is. And to me, the story of Sita and Ram is really a story about love. Love for the natural world, but love for humanity. Love, the basis of their life was love. And, and as I recounted in my first book, The Journey Through Time, what we take with us after we leave this body is the love relationships, We carry those with us, and they come back.
Well, I think the other thing that is so very obvious in the entire book is that there has to be a balance between the male and the female energy. It isn't just one or the other. It's there, with the balance comes a harmony that is magical.
I actually like that word balance a lot. I use it, I use it a lot now because our society is so out of balance, and everything is so connected. The imbalance ecological, it was connected to the gender imbalance. But during Sita's time, it was a pre-patriarchal time. And so from early on, she was given access to the women rishis and given all the spiritual education that any man would have. And then along her journey, she met many of the women sages who had extraordinary powers, because it was a time when there were many sages on Earth, living in simple places in the forest, trying to maintain the spiritual knowledge that had been given from earlier times, and through teaching students and through teaching them the sacred spiritual knowledge. And so there were many women who played a very important role at that time. And in the course of history, those women have been either forgotten or downgraded, and subsequently just called the wife of the great sage, instead of being recognized as a sage in her own right. And so I try to recall. There are many stories that are in the Indian tradition that I tell in a different light, kind of freeing them from the patriarchal overlay that came in a later time.
Well, I think that we're at one of those times still. With it's more male domination than it is female. Although women are coming more and more into their own and being recognized for the power that they have. I think one of the other things that you brought out here in the book that I was fascinated by, and I saw an absolute correlation to the times now, is that at some point, was it the sages that had the power to curse someone, and it devastated not one generation but 7 or 6 or however many it was. And I saw that as a very powerful destructive force, and I equate it with our atomic energy now. That it is so powerful that it destroys things for many generations. So that in some way it was the exact same thing.
Well, in each age it manifests slightly differently, but at that time it was the power of the word, the power of sound, the power of mantras. Mantras are very powerful. They were used as weapons, and you could incinerate someone through the power of a mantra, literally incinerate them. There was so much force in that. And in earlier times, the sages knew how to use these powers to maintain the balance of society. But as time came on, they got swayed by their emotions, and their anger would overtake them, and they would misuse this power. And so one of Sita's objectives was to end that phenomenon. And Ram's purpose was to set up these institutions of justice that could then determine what kind of punishment should be given for misdeeds. But the power of the curse was like an atomic weapon, because it couldn't be retracted. Once it was out there, it could not be retracted, and they were very destructive energies that were released, because these sages had great mental force, and so
it went. Was the curse for a certain period of time, or was that determined by the person who was throwing the curse?
It was determined by the person throwing the curse.
Okay.
I mean, it could be, a curse on someone for 5 generations, because of some misdeed that they did. And, it could have been, think about it, there were no institutions of justice. There were no legal systems at that time. So the ones to keep people in line, although what I saw when I felt myself back in that time is that, generally speaking, society was much more balanced and harmonious. And the rulers of the time had a tremendous sense of duty and obligation to the well-being of their kingdom and the community. So it wasn't for their own power or wealth. It was really to provide for the people, to provide for their needs, whatever the needs were, food and good places to live, and to keep the balance of the seasons, the rains, and all of that. And so there were mantras for the rains and mantras to ward off illnesses, all kinds of things. But it was much more balanced. But there were no, if somebody sexually harassed you, you couldn't go to, who were you going to go talk to? So these sages, their curses were people feared them, because they, if you misbehaved, and a sage found out about it, he would curse you, and that was a very serious matter. But one of Ram's roles in establishing this new civilization was to set up the institutions of justice that would be out of the hands of the sages, but that would be the people themselves would decide what was appropriate punishment.
Yeah, they didn't seem to want to be separated that way. They kind of, it appeared to really rather enjoy that there was, a Maharaja above everything that made decisions, and to set up those institutions where the different levels governed the different levels was really fascinating to watch. I think also one thing in reading your book, and I'm going to have to go back and read it again, because I kept saying as I went through it, oh, that's cool, I should write that down, and then of course I didn't. But by the time I figured out what was happening, I was almost done with the book. But you have sprinkled throughout the book some of the most profound statements that really resonated with me. And the one that I did write down was, knowledge without love is not wisdom. And
right. Yes.
I don't know if these came from you or through you, or
through
if
me.
They are.
They definitely came through me. I heard these things coming through. I mean, I experienced the book as if it was a past life recall, as if I was the servant. The story is told through the eyes of a servant in Sita's household in the kingdom. And I experienced myself as that servant. And then later I said to myself, well, I don't know if this is true. In my first book, I had very concrete kind of evidence of my previous birth, but didn't go back that far in time. And so then I thought to myself, well, maybe I'm channeling that servant, because it was definitely that kind of channeling experience where I was just the scribe. I was hearing these things and seeing these things. And then I said to myself, well, how am I to know, number one, and does it really matter? Here I am in the presence of Sita, this great being who's still very present in the world. She's you mentioned that she was an incarnation of a great Devi goddess, and these divine beings don't disappear. There is such an intense love for not just humans, but for all of Earth and creation, that they continue to guide even when they're not physically present on the earth. So she came down at a particular time to achieve a certain mission. But she over the millennia, and we're talking, there's no exact date for this, about 5,000, maybe between 5,000 and 7,000 years ago. And there's archaeological evidence that shows that this story is, that these were historical figures. But she has been beloved to this day by all Hindus, by all people in India. She and Ram, I mean, they're beloved figures. So the power of a being to be so remembered and so cherished for so many millennia is quite astounding. And my experience of her was as a pure being of love, just a pure being of love, who's very present. I've felt for quite some time that the divine feminine presence is very strong in the world now, because it's so needed. Because we've gotten so away from this, from seeing love as the foundation of everything, and that's what's going to ensure our survival. You know, if we come back to that understanding that love is the foundation of the universe and the foundation of life. And so we have to align ourselves with that again.
Well, I think several times during the story, she does talk about going to other worlds, to other places, to other universes. She
yes.
looks at the stars and she flows with them, and of course those who understand a spirit is formless and does not have the same restrictions that a human body does. That is where our spirit goes, and I just think it was such a spiritual story, but there was a deeper spirituality to it as you were telling it, and it was sort of like, look at all these different levels that she's hitting. At one point she was looking for a plant and couldn't find it, and then somebody came to, I don't think it was Sita, I think it was her companion Soma. And
Soma, yes.
Somebody came looking for a certain plant, and it was needed greatly, and the plant no longer existed, and they were told of another plant that was a new plant that would be able to replace it, so that even though it was the plants told them. I mean, the river told them, and these
everything communicated with everything. Everything communicated with everything, and one plant was dying out, but a new species was arising that would be more potent and address the needs that they had. And so, the natural world communicated all this to her. And that's the way it was. That's really the way it was. I mean, think how far we've come from that now. And as a result of having come so far from that, look at the state of our world. So it's just, we have to remember that way of being existed and can exist again.
It is a shame, because with time and with evolution and with technology, we have become so separate from nature that we have lost that connection and that insight and that wisdom. And without that connection, we are cut off. And I'm not I'm not saying everybody has to go out and live in a hut someplace and eat grass, but there is a part of our society that no longer really pays attention to the beauty of the earth or the sky, and I have spent hours and hours and hours watching the stars, and they tell stories if you listen to them. And
absolutely, and actually scientifically, they know that all bodies, heavenly bodies, make sounds that we can't hear simply because our ears can't pick up that range. So I was reading something, a scientific study some years ago, no, maybe 6 months ago, about a new solar system that they found that had it's the smallest star, and there were 7 planets. They were closer to that star, and they picked up the sounds, and it was a beautiful, harmonious sound that these planets made as they moved around the star, their sun. And the human ear couldn't pick this up, and I thought to myself, well, that must be true of everything.
Mhm.
Every the moon must sing, and we can't hear it.
Yeah, that would. But you know something? I think that it's up to the individual to put themselves in that space, that energy, to be able to listen and to really listen. And there's
yes,
so
I
much.
agree with you. And even just to connect with. I mean, most people can't even see the sky, can't see the stars, but we can see the moon. And I mean, how many of us actually go out every night to just be with the moon and just to acknowledge the moon, which has such an impact on our lives, the moon, on all the water in our body, not just the water in the seas, but the water in our body.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I learned so much in the writing of this book because, as I said, I was just hearing it and seeing it, and I was getting so many teachings myself, and it really made me much more conscious of these things that we're talking about now.
And it just, to me, it was I am not familiar with the Devas and the Vedas and everything as I should be. To a degree I am, but not to this level. And it was enchanting to travel through time with this book, because it does put you in a place where you have to say, okay, I can see that, I can feel that, and look how far we've come. And isn't it a shame that technology is so advanced that we have let go of our connection to the earth and nature itself? And you kind of want to get back to it. You kind of want to go to a botanical gardens and just step into a rainforest for a period of time. And when you see what we're doing to the planet, how we are destroying our forests, how we are destroying the earth itself and not even paying attention to rotate things, how we and the other thing that I was so fascinated by, it was okay to sacrifice animals for food, but at one point they began to do it for pleasure and do it for sport, which was horrifying.
Right.
And I mean, I'm not really thrilled with what we're doing and with raising. I have trouble raising an animal to eat. That just doesn't feel right to me. And
I agree.
I get.
I'm a vegetarian, so I haven't eaten meat. But I think there was a time when you took from the forest what you needed, but no more, and that was a law. That was a spiritual law that you. It was like in people knew that because they knew that there was no need to take more than you would need. I mean, there was no purpose in doing that, and they knew that to keep the balance, that was the way to live. But then there came a time when people wanted to capture animals and people wanted to kill them for sport, and that was the beginning of this imbalance and this kind of hardening of that the connection with the natural world.
Well, the Native Americans used to ask permission before they killed an animal, and then they blessed the spirit, and thanked them for their skin and for their bones and for their antlers and for their food and for all of the aspects of them that they then welcomed into their own energetic field. Can you see us doing it in the grocery store now? I mean, it just it boggles the mind. But there's a reason for you to have written this book now.
Yes. There's a reason, and I think that there were three. I mean, there were many threads, but there were three main threads that came through for me. One is the ecological story, the going back to a time when there was balance, and then it was kind of like innate in the human being to be part of that and to maintain the balance. So it's going back to see that time and to realize we've got to now just turn the ship. We've got to just turn the ship and awaken that consciousness in us. That was one theme that was very strong. The other theme that was very strong is realizing that this gender imbalance was not always there, that there was a time when there was deep appreciation of the feminine wisdom and an honoring of the feminine wisdom, both in the women sages and teachers and in the female deities, the role of the female divine energy. And so to remember that was part of what kept society in balance. So in order to rebalance our society, to come again into that, and I see now, I mean, there's so much, it seems like everything is too much one way or too much another way. So in trying to rebalance, there's the danger of harming the masculine energy, or of not honoring the higher masculine energy. And one of the things I saw in the figure of Ram is what this higher masculine energy looks like, which was a very beautiful, very supportive and honoring energy, honoring of the female. So it was going back to that, to see what that gender balance was like. And the third thing is that we've really forgotten in our society is the importance of love. I mean, it's not just the importance of love, is that is the foundation of everything. You can't have a balanced society without love. We can't heal the earth without love for the earth. We can't heal humanity without opening our hearts and feeling that love. And the sense of justice that comes from love. It's wanting to rebalance things. So I think it's a very appropriate story for our time to help us see the direction that we need to go in.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that we are one only has to listen if one is brave enough to some of the news stories that are out there, and to see that the element of love is not present. It's power struggles, both on the male and the female side. It's not just one or the other.
Oh no, it's both. And that's not going to lead to an equilibrium, to a harmony. I mean, that's going to lead to further polarization and separation, which is what we want to overcome. I mean, our society is very polarized now in so many different ways, and we have to bring it back into a unity.
And how does one do that? Well, putting a book like this out there so that people can read it and start to recognize the fact that at this moment in time we are out of balance. But I think the one of the coolest parts of all of this is that while we are totally out of balance, we're not out of hope. And
exactly, yes. and I actually think young people in particular are motivated now. I see a lot of energy in young people. I think that they don't have the experience to maybe to understand how to rebalance things. But there's certainly an energy for transformation and for transition in the younger generation, and that's a positive thing.
I kind of wonder now this is a cycle that certainly Sita was thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, and the planet is millions and millions and millions of years old. So there is a cycle that has been ongoing for millions of years, and
that's right.
What I find fascinating is that, and what gives me hope is if we screw it up this time, we'll have another chance.
Oh, definitely. We'll have as many chances as we need.
Yeah.
I mean, we keep coming back, and culture keeps evolving, civilization keeps evolving, and I mean, it never goes back to what it was, but a new formation of a higher civilization will come. I have no doubt about that. It's a journey of love. I mean, we're here to awaken. I think one of the misunderstandings of this of the law of karma is people see it as punishment, but it's really a law of awakening, of helping the soul awaken to its true nature. So how do you awaken? By seeing mistakes that you've made, by coming, even if you have to go through it 3 or 4 times. Sometimes you do have to repeat things in order to get it.
Mhm.
The first time round you don't get it. Second time round, well, maybe a little bit. Third time round, maybe.
Yeah. I think that's the coolest part of it. It's just that some people, and I look at my own past, and it's like, my, I did repeat that pattern a number of times. Let's not do
we've all got
again.
that. We've all got that. And at a certain point, you begin to see your patterns.
Mhm.
And it's of course easier to see in other people. Sometimes you can't see it so well in yourself. But until you become conscious of it, it's like a groove in the brain that just it's used to going in that way.
Yeah, and what I found fascinating was, like I said before, that there is a cycle that you talk about that is very similar to the progression of the equinoxes, and it goes to the level of consciousness of humanity, and how though it will start in one place and then it will go way far away. It's like a pendulum; it swings back, and and where in that pendulum are we now? Are we getting less and less, or more and more?
So the Yuga theory in the Eastern accounting of time, and at the beginning of the book, or maybe it's at the end of the book. I think it's at the end of the book. I reconcile this linear evolution, linear sense of time, with the cyclical sense of time, because the cyclical sense of time, the Yugas, the 4 Yugas, which I guess equate to the what we call the Golden Age or the Bronze Age or the Iron Age. It's the Age of Truth, the Satya Yuga, and then there's the Third Age, the Treta Yuga, and then the Dwapara, and then the Kali Yuga, the time of spiritual darkness. And it equates to our movement through our Milky Way galaxy, which has a pattern to it. And because we move, our solar system moves through our galaxy, and as our planet and our solar system is closer to the center of the galaxy, the magnetic center of the galaxy, the spiritual consciousness is more developed. And then in our cycle, as we move away from that center, the spiritual perceptions are weakened. And so, according to many people, and there's no real agreement on this, we've emerged from the darkest period, the darkest age, and are now beginning to move closer to that center of the galaxy, which would mean that we're in the second age, which would be the Dwapara Yuga, which would be not an age of great spiritual advancement, but certainly an age of moving in that direction. And so moving out of the material age. And I think we see that in a lot of there's certainly a lot of scientific discoveries, discoveries of electricity and subtler energies, the use of nuclear, even though it's misused, just the understanding of the atom. And then in a spiritual sense, this spiritual awakening that's taking place on a much larger scale now than it was, a few hundred years ago, even 100 years ago.
Oh yeah.
So I think we're definitely, and then people say to me, but if you look, it looks like things are collapsing, and I think the old structures that are built on a less conscious understanding are what's failing us now. An economic system that's built on tremendous inequality, it's failing us. Political systems that are corrupt and are not based on the well-being of the people but on personal advancement, those are stagnating and being paralyzed. And so the systems that don't serve the well-being of the whole are the systems that are cracking. And something new will emerge that will be much more in line with a higher consciousness. We just don't know the timing. It could be 10 years, it could be 50 years.
Well, I think one of the things that impressed me so much with the individuals that were in your story was their acceptance of the grace and the joy of where they were and how they were, not wishing for something else, but being content with. And content is maybe not the right word, but to be accepting of where they were and how they were, and not wanting something else, but being focused on and dedicated to their service, to a person in some cases, but not necessarily that person, but what that person represented.
I think what I saw, that the nature of society at that time, there was dignity to every role. So even a servant had tremendous dignity. And, my voice as a young servant in there, there's something I had to learn. My father in that story was the epitome of that. He was a servant, and he took great pride, and that was the meaning of his life, was to serve the one who he adored, the king. And the other part of it was the love that came from the king, and Sita was a princess in historically. The love that was showed to the servants was extraordinary, and that was what moved me the most as a young servant who was nobody special. Life situation brought her into that role. And, she struggled because her family had been cursed, and there were many struggles. Life was not easy for her. She lost her father. She was alone. And yet the love that was poured onto her by not just her, everyone, was a real teaching to me, because then you look at our society today, and people who serve, they're not given the proper dignity and honoring. Every job in society should be given equal dignity, really, because all jobs are important, and we've come so far from that. And of course, in the intervening, many thousands and hundreds of years, social structures were set up, and castes was set up in India, and we had feudal societies here in the West, and we had slaves. We had all kinds of things that demeaned people. So there was not only a separation from nature, but a separating of people into higher and lesser roles. And I think one of the great challenges of the human community in terms of evolution is to evolve beyond this superior, this religion is better, this race is better, this ethnic group is better, this social status is better. The way we have to position people as being higher and lower, and I think that didn't exist in higher ages. And we if we don't evolve beyond that, we're going to have it creates great suffering. It's a cause of great suffering.
Oh, it absolutely is. And in your story, I mean, even Sita went out and plowed a field. She wanted to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a sense here of understanding that there's a joy in the moment. And
enjoying the moment, enjoying being part of the whole,
Yeah.
experiencing what the farmer experiences, because the farmer was like, they were at the cutting edge. This was the beginning of the agricultural revolution. Plows were new. Her father had invented this particular kind of plow. The king had invented it, and he was known as the farmer king.
Well, he also he also was the one responsible, I believe, for setting up how they would govern each other and themselves instead of always bringing stuff to him. They were taking
he had no interest, and this is all historical stuff. He had no interest in being a king. He was the rishi king. He wanted to be with the sages, and so he was very eager to teach his people how they can deal with their local problems themselves. So he set up, and this was really the early experiments in democracy. He set up these councils so that people could learn to, govern and their own kind of immediate needs in the villages. And those councils actually have never been disrupted. They still exist in rural India, where the councils decide the local issues. And there are councils of elders. Now, over time, maybe women no longer became part of those councils. But it was kind of the respected people of the village. And he gave, and so Sita saw this. His was known as the knowledge kingdom, where Sita's husband Ram, it was a much more powerful. They were much wealthier and more extensive. So it was this bridging of power and knowledge that he saw would be so important for the future. And so that's what Sita brought. It's this understanding of the importance of knowledge, of wisdom.
Yeah, it was.
People don't realize, but the feminine holds wisdom. I mean, if there's many of the at least in the Indian tradition, the goddess is the goddess of wisdom. Wisdom is considered to be the female energy.
Yeah, I mean, it is amazing that somehow throughout time, all the power and all the wisdom and all the whatever seems to have been transferred over to the males, and I'm not necessarily saying it should all go back to the women. I mean, there was a time when women did rule the world, and they were pretty bloody at the time. So I can't say that it was all peace, love, and lollipops.
Yeah, no, I think I think it's this balance, and making sure it's the higher qualities of wisdom. Not power. Power without wisdom is dangerous. And what happened subsequently in the human story was the prioritizing of power, and thus began all the empires and the conquests and on and on and on until today. I mean, we haven't yet outgrown that empire or consciousness. And
had there not been an ice age and a flood, what might society have become?
Well, if there had not been an ice age, I mean, we have, there are these stories of these very, very ancient cultures, Atlantis and Lemuria, and it's very hard to find out anything about them. They're somehow still in the collective memory, but we don't know much about them. And they could have been in a whole nother cycle. Lemuria certainly was more ancient than Atlantis. And it would make sense that Atlantis would have sunk in the flooding, but maybe had they not. Although there are also stories about the misuse of their technology, that they had great technology which they then misused, and so they led to their own demise. I don't know. I actually have left open the possibility of going back there. You know, I'm working on another book, and then I have another book after that goes back further in time. So I'm trying to see as much as I can. Put it that way.
You know, there were often times in the story where she was doing astral travel. I mean, that would be my definition of what she was doing.
That's right. Yeah.
And so that is a quality, that is an aspect that people are able to do today, but it takes work. And I think the story is beautiful and the story is wonderful, and what people don't understand is this is not a switch you turn on. This is a study of a lifetime, and this is something you become by embracing another level of consciousness. And
all of us can be that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we all have that. We all have that capacity within us because we are the divine soul. Mm-hmm. And it's just we don't think of ourselves that way. We think of ourselves as being limited to a human body.
But that's something that's been taught to us, and you know, we've been programmed that way, and it's a matter of deprogramming. And the other thing that I found fascinating was it appeared to me, and I don't know if it's, you know, you're the person to ask. She was doing interdimensional travel as well.
Exactly. Yes, that's exactly right. She was working on many planes, and
right.
What I realized in this that the way the story is told traditionally, it's just the outer narrative. This happened, and they were sent into exile. They wandered through the forest. This is what happened in the forest. It's all the outer story. I wanted to know what was happening at a deeper level, what was happening on the inner planes. And then I saw all this work that she was doing in other dimensions. The story of the demonic king, Ravan, and we have people like that in our world today. Hitler was such a being who have tremendous destructive capacity, and he was kind of setting new models of destructive behavior. But she had to go in. The way the story is told traditionally, Sita is kidnapped by him, and Ram fights a battle to free her. The way I saw the story is that she willingly allowed herself to be taken so that she could go into the heart of the kingdom and work with him on the inner planes to help free him from all his harmful, destructive instincts. And then there's a story of how he came to be, and he, had been a high being who had not eradicated the seeds of anger and pride. And one thing led to another, which led to his birth in that form on earth. But it shows that there's so much behind the scenes that we don't see. And it made me look at what's happening in our world today differently. It's like, well, what's really happening behind the scenes? It's like, many of us feel like in the U.S., what's happened to us in the last few years? Suddenly we've become an angry, violent nation. How did that happen? We didn't feel that way a few years ago. Well, things weren't perfect for sure.
I mean, when you're looking at this story, which is beautiful, you have to come to realize that these energies, these spirits that lived during that time, have reincarnated over and over and over and over and over.
Exactly. Yes.
And well could be in this time frame as well. So the cool question I have to ask is: are there rishis and sages today, or is that just something that we have relegated to the past?
No, I think that there are rishis and sages today. They may not be in the marketplace. They may not be the ones with websites and on Facebook. As a matter of fact, they probably are not the ones with websites and Facebook. They're probably in quiet places, and you stumble upon them. The world has become such a noisy place with all the internet, social media stuff. There's some who may be prominent. I think the Dalai Lama is a great soul, very wise.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there are others like that. Desmond Tutu is a very wise soul. I mean, there are some who have a lot of wisdom and a lot of love and compassion. But by and large, those are exceptions. I think that the rishis would shun the social media circuit and the tours, the lecture tours, and all of that. But there have been I know about Hindu tradition and the Buddhist tradition a little bit. There have been great sages within that tradition. My own guru, Yogananda, who passed away in 1952, and there have been others. And then there was the last 13th Karmapa was a great soul. So I think that there have been, and I've met, because I've worked in the interfaith world, Father Thomas Keating. There have been great souls in every tradition, but they tend to be not the ones selling themselves. If you know what I mean.
But one begins to wonder, okay, so their purpose is to be an example. And
yes.
For those who have the old saying, with eyes to see and ears to hear type stuff, in my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they're here to be an example, and by being an example, people seek to find that place within themselves that can take them to that place. One of the things you talk about a lot is meditation of one form or another, and certainly there are many different forms and ways of meditating, of reaching for that portal within that takes you into the other realms. And it is an important part of a spiritual journey, and that doesn't mean that you sit in a certain position and you chant Om for 10 hours a day.
Right.
Right. Unless that is your thing, and
for some people that's their path. Not for everybody. Right.
I guarantee you they're not walking a path, then they are doing it on a spiritual level. But it's a matter of how do you connect the two? How do you bring that amazing sense of love and self and compassion and sharing and all of the wonderful things that go with this philosophy? How do you integrate it into a society that is so adverse to all of that?
Right.
You write books, that's how you're
think that's
doing
the
it.
challenge. I mean, I have found, since writing this book, and it was a period of 2 to 3 years that I was living with Sita, that she became an ongoing presence for me, so that I refer to her when in my daily life, when things come up, and I think, well, how would Sita act, or how would I want to please her? Want to be a vehicle for her in the world. But I think it's. I mean, we have a massive undertaking in terms of shifting from a society that is based on profit above people, and taking what you want, basically, without regard for its impact, and not valuing human life. It's amazing. We talk about all the people who we talk about, people who the people who say they honor life, and yet I say to myself, well, well, there's a whole bunch of ways that you have to honor life. You don't just choose one issue. What about animal life? What about the life of the oceans and the rivers, and what about wars and violence and all that? I mean, it's honoring life is a an ongoing effort because it's very easy to become. It's like you have to. It's almost like too hard to take in all the ways that they're suffering in the world, so you close off to it. You may take up one issue, but you close off to everything else because also a lot of people feel helpless, but it's false to think that we can't have an impact. It's really that's a false notion that we don't have an impact.
Yeah, and I think one of the important things is it's if your purpose, like with the sages, is to be an example. It's not even caring to find out if anybody saw you or heard you. That's the radio show doing Nightlight. I don't know if anybody's listening. I don't know who's going to hear. But I do know that we are putting out information that is going to float on the ether. And
That's right.
Maybe in 1,000 years somebody will pull it out and say, wow, they knew what they were talking about, hopefully. But, it's sort of like you do things on faith, and the element of faith is so important. And that means you don't care if there are numbers. I mean, I ask people to sign on and subscribe to the YouTube channel because, that will help us get out to greater numbers of people, hopefully. But I know Mark and I talk often about it, and I often say to him, if what you're doing gives you pleasure and it's a message that you want to share, then don't worry about numbers. Do your best, put it out there, and trust that those who need to hear will hear. And
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't worry about the outcome. You just worry about doing the best job you can, and leave the outcome in the hands of the divine, whatever it's going to be. That's how I feel.
Oh yeah, but as far as the radio station goes, we're very fortunate. We do this because it gives us joy. If I had to eat on this, if I had to make a living doing this, my attitude would have to be different because eating is important to me. So.
Well, I'm the same way with my books. It's luckily I mean any income that comes from the books goes to the Global Peace Initiative. I don't take any of it because the idea of taking money from this gift I'm just my gratitude for the gift, for the experience is really all that I care about. That's what my gift has been to be able to have the experience. But there are people who do, who have to feed themselves based on their writing and their radio shows, and that's a different thing. And it's a blessing if you don't have to. It's just a gift that we've been given. Yeah.
It is cool, and it takes away. You're not answering to anyone. You're answering to yourself. You're doing what feels right. You're giving, and it's in your own way. And I want to get back to the meditation part though, because so many people keep saying, I can't do it this way or do it that way. I know that there are traditional forms of meditation, but to me, meditation is listening. And
it absolutely. I mean, it's quieting the mind, so you're not running after. You're not in memory land. You're not in planning for the future. You're not in anxiety land about paying your bills. You're just trying to let all of that go so that you can be still, and then it's listening. For me, it's a lot of listening. But I think that there are many ways to reach that state. You can reach it sitting by a river, being very, very quiet and just listening to the river, and you can reach that state. Now, the rishis the sages have developed many practices to help the mind free itself from its train of thoughts. And those are just practices to get, to help you quiet the mind. Once the mind is quiet, you're in that place of listening and being one with. So it's both listening and then just feeling yourself as one with everything. And that's a very joyful state.
It is. I tell people to just be in the moment, and just be. I once gave out little pins of bees to people to say, just to remind them to just be. And if every moment you're just being the best you can, and the amplification of the love that is inside of you, that things do fall into place. And and so to remind yourself to just be is very important. And then if you take it 50 steps forward, understanding that bees pollinate. Bees spread pollen so things can grow. And if what you're doing is pollinating the world with love, that's an amazing gift.
That's an amazing gift. Yeah.
I mean, you may not get your name on a plaque. You may not be given a presidential award, but it is the coolest thing to just be in that moment and be one with the universe and be one with nature, and to just be, to not worry about the past because that's gone, and the future hasn't happened yet. So the only thing that's really important is the moment.
And I think one of the tragedies of so much destruction of the natural world is that is a source of so much happiness. I mean, people love to go walk in the forest. People love to go sit by the ocean. People love to to go to immerse themselves in a clean river. I mean, these things give joy, and as there's fewer and fewer opportunities. Because the rivers are polluted, the ocean's polluted, the not so many forests, we're taking away from ourselves all these opportunities to experience joy.
That's true, but the one thing that I have always found phenomenal is, while being one with nature and being in nature is magical. There is no denying it. There is. I give me a great thunderstorm any day. That is the coolest thing in the world. But
I love the thunderstorms too.
You can be in that space inside of yourself. You can create a bubble, and you can fill that bubble with the peace and the joy of the moment. There were people that survived Auschwitz because they were able to do that, and so that there were people that were dying that were able to be in that place inside of themselves that it was okay.
Now, my first book, if you do remember that there is a scene. I died during World War II, and after my death, or at the moment of death, I saw the concentration camps, because it wasn't common knowledge where what was happening. We knew Jews were disappearing, but we didn't know what was happening. And then I saw them, and I did see there that there were angelic beings who were providing comfort and helping those who were dying to pass over. So that's another element. There are beings of the forest. There are beings of the rivers. There are beings. The world is filled with life, whether we see it or not. It doesn't mean, just because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not there.
And I have to tell you, I still see unicorns.
Oh, do you see unicorns?
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness. Oh,
absolutely.
And they're beautiful, huh? I have never seen one.
Oh,
are they beautiful?
They're beautiful. They're not anything like the goat creatures that they have in some of the European tapestries and stuff like that. They're beautiful, and they glow.
And they glow, yeah.
And they glow. I've seen them twice or three times, usually around my gardens.
Wow.
I go into my gardens sometimes late at night, early morning, and when the mist is just beginning to rise from the ground, and that's when I see them, and they're still around. So now
in
whether
the flower
I am,
garden, are they in the flower garden or vegetable flower garden? Yeah,
they're flower gardens because I'm a flower person. And when you can be in a space in a bubble, I guess, that is so magical that there is a stillness in the air, and the mist is coming up out of the ground, and the sun has yet to rise, and you can see them. They're there. They graze, and happily they graze.
It's seeing into another dimension, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although they eat my plants, and the plants are usually gone in the morning, so they may have crossed over and snacked a bit, but
they probably can do that, cross over, and then right.
It's magical when those moments happen, and you kind of wish you could record them or catch them on your cell phone or something, but that's of course inappropriate. But I still would like to do it. But we are capable of putting ourselves into those moments, of having those mountaintop experiences, lots of people call them, of being so one with your surroundings.
And penetrating into the subtler worlds. I have that experience, which I talk about in my first book, with the river Ganga in India, where I had this tremendous love for this river. And it's like every year I have to make a pilgrimage to go find a clean spot for her way up in the mountains and sit it's like I have to go visit my mother, and she talks to me. She offers me a lot of counsel. And if I talk to an indigenous person, they totally get it. There's no issue if I say that. The river talks to me. But, it's something that in the Western mind, the rational mind, so what happened in the last few thousand years is that we've focused on developing the rational mind, and we've suppressed the intuitive part of ourselves, the intuitive, the heart mind, so to speak. And so we've lost the ability to have these experiences. But I think that's, again, part of that imbalance that we've got to now rebalance.
Oh, yeah, but, and I think, as parents as well, we were programmed as children to believe certain ways. And at some point in time, you broke that programming and opened yourself up to another realm. I did the same thing, but it took a long time to get to a place where it was like, no, there's something more here. What is amazing is the physical planet is in trouble, but the energetic planet is perfect.
Exactly.
And glowing.
Exactly. I mean, we have to heal ourselves. We don't have to worry so much about healing the earth. We have to heal ourselves so that we stop doing these horrible things to the earth, and the earth will heal. Because the energy body of the earth is, the earth is more powerful than we are. She can shake us off, She can, the earth is a powerful being, a compassionate one and a caring one. She wants us to do well. And so we have to focus on healing our minds and spirits so that we can feel, connect again with the earth and feel ourselves as part of her.
Well, and I'm pretty sure that there are at least one or two people out there saying, well, that's just fine for them. They figured it out. How do I do it? And the reality is it's going inside of yourself. It can't be. There is no enlightenment transformation 101 out there. There is not an evolution for dummies book out there, though there should be. But it would be nice. Yeah. But the reality is this is a personal journey unique unto every spirit, and everyone will find their way if they search for it. And the best way to start is to quiet yourself, and sometimes solfeggio music helps because it puts you into an alpha theta state so that you can
Yeah,
listen.
music helps. Music is great that way. But I also tell people that if they're attentive, if they're really kind of paying attention to themselves, they'll see that everybody has had some experience. You know, they may dismiss it. You know, they may not want to, they may not admit it or talk about it openly. But in talking about my first book, I had many people call in and many people say to me, "Yeah, I've had an experience of a past life, but I don't know if it's true." You know, 'cause that's the rational mind speaking. So I think that almost everybody has had some experience that's kind of like been an opening for them, or kind of like a gift to say, hey, you know, there's much more than this. But often people don't know how to respond to that.
Well, and everyone I know of has had one of those moments when, usually when you're in bed asleep and you feel like suddenly like you're falling and you jerk yourself awake.
Yeah.
That's coming back from astral travel. So that So that everyone has had these experiences, and if you keep records of them, if you keep track of coincidences as they happen, you'll see that your spirit is sending you messages constantly.
Constantly.
It's a matter of, you know, pay attention, write it down. When you write it down, there is something about writing it down and anchoring it within this reality. You sort of let your spirit know, I got it, send more. I'm paying attention. That's okay, send more. And you know, it helps to increase it, to make you more aware of those coincidences, to look for them and to be aware of them when they occur. And the more attuned you get, and most of the time they have to do with nature. They have to do with, you know, butterflies or birds or something happening that is unusual. And electronically it happens too, but mostly I have found that it is more, for me, more of a spiritual, more of a physical nature than you know, electronic.
I think we also get messages from our guides. Everybody has guides.
Absolutely.
And you know, sometimes you just, you know, or protection, you know, where you just avoid an accident. That's happened many times. And you say, wow, you know, I was protected there. But, you know, that, I mean, when you realize that there's so much love and protection for everybody, from guides, but we just don't take them, we don't allow ourselves to recognize it for the most part.
Yeah. And I think one of the really important parts of your first book, which I adored, I love this one too, but the first book to me was so amazing, because some people often say, well, you know, past lives don't mean anything. Well, they do, and they aren't just random jumps through time. They have connections to each other that awaken you to new aspects and new potential and new directions within your life. And your first book you made that so very clear.
It was amazing to me to see how it all connects like a beautiful weaving, like a beautiful tapestry. And it's like, oh my God, it's just like mind-boggling. You know, the people that weave in and out, things that couldn't be completed in one life get completed 3 lives later. So it's not just that you're the product of what just came previously. You're the product of so many experiences. And so we've all been everything. We've been rich, we've been poor, we've been, you know, kings and queens, we've been beggars, and we've been everything. And when you realize that, it's like, well, what's there left to want?
Well,
you know?
I don't
work
know.
for a more beautiful world.
Yeah, well, and that's also a point. You know, it is. You know, both your books do deal with the fact that, you know, we are We are here to have a better balance, to understand humanity to a higher degree and a better degree, to not judge, and to accept and trust.
Be of service and be of service.
And certainly that is something that was very clear in the first book, and is very clear in this book as well. I think that also the fact that the role of the female is so important as well. The fact that as women there is an obligation and a power to share wisdom in whatever way is most appropriate for you, so that not everybody has to write books, nor go on a lecture circuit or anything like that. Although everybody can write books today, anybody can publish a book. So
it's what you feel called to do, and what's the work that's been given you to do. It's different for every person, and it's all important. It's all important.
Absolutely.
And everybody makes their particular contribution, and we're all working toward the evolution of individual or ourselves individually and the species. Yeah, that's important.
Well, I think that's and I'm glad you said the species, because so many people identify with a certain color or code or religion or philosophy, and this is a family of man and woman, but it is one family, and while we may not look alike, we are a family, and we have to treat each other that way. And so often there's so much judgment out here that it is frightening. And we seem to always find different ways of delineating ourselves so that we get into smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller groups. You are a color, you are a religion, you are a political party, you are a sexual being of some sort. And and then you get down to a really small clique, and you isolate yourself from everybody else because of it. And that isn't healthy
I call it, like the superiority gene, is that we've got to feel that we're better. Whether it's a racial thing or a religious thing. I mean, it's really, when you think about it, it's childish. Why would one religion think that it's the only one that has truth? Or one way to think that they're better just because the skin color's different. I mean, it just seems ridiculous, doesn't it?
Well, it does, and you get right down. I think somebody someplace said, the Creator wasn't Jewish or Catholic or Buddhist or Hindu.
No.
Or
or all of the above.
and or male or female, so that there was an energetic of love, and that is something all of us can not only manifest but can be shared. I mean, I may not agree with everything politically you agree with, but I can agree that there is a commonality here of a human spirit that is just a joyful experience, and we don't need to talk about those things that we don't agree on intellectually. We can just agree on the things that we agree on spiritually.
Well, I think that one of the mind-boggling things about the divine is the infinite diversity. Infinite diversity. You see it in the animal kingdom. I mean, that's what's sad about all these extinctions, is that the divine expresses itself in so many ways, and that's incredible. I mean, how many millions, billions of different life forms there are on just this one planet, never mind all the other planets in the universe? I mean, there's just an infinite expression that emerges from this divine that we can't really comprehend with our human mind. We can experience it, but not really comprehend it with the rational mind.
Well, I think one of the things that I've, and my philosophy changes daily, so that, today I believe that the Creator, the divine, doesn't want to be worshipped, wants to be understood and shared. so that it's not a matter of bending knee. It's a matter of
exactly
expressing that quality through me to everybody else. So
also it's awakening to the fact that we're not separate from, that we are part of.
Yeah.
And then we become vehicles for and expressions of. Yeah, I mean, this idea of a deity who wants to be worshipped, well, that would mean that there's an ego there.
I would say yes.
Only an ego wants to be worshipped. And this is beyond ego. This is what ego doesn't exist at that level.
Isn't that a problem? With humanity, in that we see something that is so perfect and so loving and so kind, we worship it instead of learning from it. I mean, we turn everything into something that we have to worship, rather than learning and sharing and growing from it, and moving forward and expanding whatever concept it is to the betterment of our culture and our race. Not our culture, our race.
A lot of a lot of the religious institutions, what made them what they are is fear. This whole sense of fearing this consciousness. And so, this idea of worshiping was to pacify,
control,
Yeah. So that's why I think so many people are drifting away from organized religion.
What I find
especially young
fascinating
people
is that most of the traditional, the biggies, were all founded on the concept of the golden rule.
Yes,
and
that's common.
If you go right down to that one aspect, and recognize that there's a commonality among all of them, and work with that one commonality instead of all of the dogma that has been plastered on top of it over time, you've got something.
Yeah, I mean, it's a basic guide for how to develop spiritually. If you follow, consideration for others and treating others like you want to be treated, and respect and all that. That these guidelines help one kind of curtail the less desirable emotions that come up, or to moderate them.
I think what is fascinating, a lot of the researchers on ancient cultures and stuff like that, if they take it back far enough, there were no religions. There was a respect of nature, and
right.
and so there was no worship of anything. It was respect and gratitude and sharing and caring, and
yes,
and
recognizing the divine entities.
Oh yeah.
Recognizing the divine entities, but it was not, that all came later. The sense of all the rituals of, I think came later.
And so what I'm seeing, at least in the small circles that I gravitate towards, is that people are more and more becoming understanding that they carry within them a piece of that divine creation, and by connecting to it and channeling through it, or having it channel through them, they are able to have a greater appreciation for nature, for the cosmos, for individuals, for the element of love is there, and it's so strong and it's so rich, it's unbelievable. And your books,
right.
All of them, both of them do have
all
that
flowing
through them. Yes, all of them. Yes.
Well, I think people today are looking for personal experience, and not just to follow a dogma. And so, that's one of the reasons why meditation has become so popular, is that it gives people tools where they can do their own exploration, and they can go as far as they want. They can just have a little bit of peace and feel a little bit better, or they can go deeper. And the deeper you go, the more the love, the heart center opens, and then your spiritual eye opens, your spiritual center where you can perceive things like you see the unicorns. That all comes with deepening your spiritual practice. Everybody experiences it differently. Not everybody's going to see unicorns, but
no. I hadn't actually been even thinking about them, and suddenly they were there, and it was like, oh, this is so magical.
Yeah, it is very magical.
And immediately you want to run and find somebody that can look too, and then there's nobody there.
Be careful how you.
Guess what? There are unicorns in my garden. But no, it is personal, and it is unique to every individual, and so when you say to somebody you have to work on yourself, you have to find inside of yourself, where that place is that is special, and you do it by listening, and and the reality here is it is so simple. Not everyone does it.
It is so simple, and you're right to keep bringing up this point about listening, because I think it's listening to the elements of nature. It's listening to ourselves, listening to the divine voice within ourselves. It's listening to the guidance that we hear, the quiet guidance that comes through. It's listening to other people. So really, I think part of the polarization that we're talking about in the country is that people aren't listening to each other. I mean, they've just made a wall. Which side? I didn't mean to refer to the wall, but I mean, people just have divided each other. Which side? You're on this side or that side, and have stopped listening to each other. And I think that listening is really a key.
Yeah, and I look at sometimes when there are debates and things like that, people are talking at each other. They're not conversing. They're trying to outshout each other. And I think one of the greatest gifts you can give another person, the greatest gift, is your time to listen.
Yeah.
And be 100% in that moment and hear what they're saying. You don't have to agree, but listen and don't in your head already be thinking of a response, but listen to what they are saying in that moment.
Yeah.
And hearing
I
them,
think
hearing.
I think that we said this earlier, that our formats and structures no longer work for us because people have kind of outgrown them. And you're right, people shouting at each other, they're trying to make themselves heard, and instead of really having a conversation about, where do we go as a country, where do we go, how do we heal ourselves, how do we come together? It's like the whole system is now not functioning to suit the needs of the people. And a lot of people feel that because trust in so many institutions, trust in the media, trust in government figures, trust in even religious figures, is now gone. I mean, I was reading in the news about all the sexual abuse in the Boy Scouts. My goodness, who would have thought years ago the Boy Scouts?
I know it's frightening, but the reality here is that everybody has amazing wisdom to share, and to take the time to listen and find that wisdom in another person is amazing. And not only that, but you should also listen to yourself, because every now and then you say something that's really cool too. So it's not just it's not putting the mouth in motion while the brain is thinking. It's it's allowing the spirit to talk through you, because that's when the beauty comes out, and that's when the wisdom comes out. And that's I wrote a lot of poetry when a long time ago when I was channeling, and I can't write poetry. I can't write poetry. Well, I probably could if I really worked at it, but the reality is, poetry flowed through me when I stopped trying to control it.
Yeah. Well, I think, all of the answers are within us. When people used to come to my guru with a problem, he would never say, well, do this, that, and the other thing. He'd always say, go meditate. And there was one case of one of his students who sat there for hours until she got the answer. And she was annoyed because she had wanted him to say, well, this is what you should do. It's so much easier if somebody tells you what to do, than having to figure it out. But I think the lesson was that all the answers are inside. All the answers are inside. But you have to quiet yourself and you have to listen.
Well, and I tell people, now don't get me wrong, I do give advice. However, the advice I give is 100% accurate for me, from my experience. That doesn't necessarily mean it's right for somebody else, for their experience.
Exactly. Right. That's right. Yeah. I mean, you can speak from your own experience, and this is what would be right for you, but you don't know another person's karma and, what their inner feelings are. So, either it will ring true to them if you say, well, this is what I would do. Either it rings true to them or it doesn't ring true to them. They have to decide that.
Well, have you found? I have found that oftentimes people, when they are following someone else's instructions, aren't doing it wholeheartedly because it didn't come from them. It's sort of like if somebody tells you to paint this picture, you can paint it, but that's not what you were inspired to paint. And if you listen to yourself, the picture will flow through you, and it will be so much more moving and touching because your spirit is in that, not in the other. It's like there are musicians who are technical and there are musicians who are gifted artists, and you can tell the difference.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
So it's the same way with thoughts. It's the same way with advice. It's the same way with creation. It's if it comes through you, and you flow with it, then there's magic there. But if you're just being a parrot and repeating something, it's empty and meaningless.
Well, it's how you grow by struggling with an issue. I mean, if you have to make, we all encounter crossroads. We have to make an important decision. You stay married, you get divorced, you change jobs, different challenges that come in life. And, weighing the both sides and then trying to intuit which would be a better step for oneself. I mean, that's what creates growth.
Absolutely. It's not as much fun, but,
Well, it's scary. It can be scary, You have to take a big step because, there's, you have to have faith.
Right.
And I think we mentioned that earlier, but coming back to that, having faith, it's very hard to get through life without faith, I think.
Oh, I agree. And that's something that comes from trusting yourself. Every now and then something will come out of my mouth that I hadn't really anticipated in saying, and yet it was just so strong. It had to be, okay, I guess that's what I need to do, and I do it. And so far, knock on wood, it's worked out well. But you are, each of us is a totally evolved spirit. There is wisdom of the ages inside of us, and
well, also we have so much life experience looking back at our past. We've been through many, many things, many, many experiences. And so, that provides, that's all, we're, an amalgam of that. So that's all within us, those accumulation of all those experiences and the learning. And that's why I think that will come forward when we need it. So, which is why listening is so important, because that's when that experience will come out.
It does, and when it does come out for you, for whatever situation you're pondering or working on or whatever, there is a sense of comfort in that it's a wisdom that you've gathered and perfected and polished over time. That this time you're going to use it more wisely and with greater love and compassion than you did in past lifetimes. And it's an amazing feeling. It's scary sometimes, but it always works out. And
it does. And that's where the faith comes in. When you see that it always works out, after a certain point, you begin to say, okay, I'm not going to. But
sometimes you'll look and say, well, I didn't see that one coming. But it's better than you anticipated. So it's kind of like when somebody says, they're going through something, and it's like, tell me it's going to be okay, and I can with full confidence say, I know that this is going to work out well for you, and everything's going to be okay because I trust you. And then they look at you like you're crazy, but the reality is there is a pathway, and you're following it, and you're doing what you're supposed to do. And you're doing it that way because your spirit needs that experience. And once you're done, you're going to move on, and this will be a building block for you. So it may be uncomfortable and it may not be fun, but in the end it will be. And you'll look back, and there will be comfort, and there will be satisfaction that you made it through.
Yeah. Well, that's the life journey that we're all on, accumulating enough experiences until finally we say, okay,
Well, I have to tell you, this last book certainly made an amazing impression on me, because Sita is I've heard of Ram, but not Sita, and to learn about her through your book was probably a better experience, because not only did she come alive, but her message came through so beautifully. And you in reading the book, you don't realize initially that this is talking about thousands and thousands of years ago. And
right.
when that finally dawns on you, it's okay. That makes great sense. This is where all of this comes from, and it's a magical story. I don't have a favorite between the two books, because both of them have
the difference.
Unbelievable. Yeah. Oh, very different. Very different.
Yeah.
This is a much deeper story, and
yes,
and,
yes, because I think what I had hoped, what I experienced, and I had hoped others was, is that Sita's presence really comes through. And there's just a lot of blessings that come with that presence. The first book was really a kind of a study in karma and how this whole web works of the cause and effect and our growth and the people who guide us along. And we're always cared for. I mean, there was tremendous comfort I got in the first book in seeing that in every life there was always somebody there to point the way. And going back further in time to the Sita book, I realized that the presences don't leave you. It's we who forget to tune in. They don't leave us. We leave them. And so
they're along for the ride, though. So that's the
they're
cool
there.
Thing is,
it's just
yes.
Yeah. It's just we who have to tune the radio to the right station. It's like we have to tune the radio of our mind to the right station so that we can connect with these divine beings. And I it makes me feel optimistic about the future because there are a lot of guides there just waiting to help us.
Oh, absolutely. And all we have to do is listen.
Listen. That's right.
Yeah. And it's hard. It's hard from time to time to tune out, the television and the cell phone and the news but the reality is, if you can do that, if you can put yourself in that place, in that space where there isn't the static of everyday life, just being inflicted upon you, and I tell people sometimes, create a bubble. Just see yourself in a bubble and tune it out. I know there are times and places where you can find that kind of quietude, but it is important for you to find that space to be able to reach for the information you're looking for. And you don't ask for anything. You wait for it. It's kind of like you don't ask a question, because if you're asking a question, the answer will come to that question, but it may not be what you really need to hear at that time. So to just listen and let wisdom come to you is so much more important in my mind.
It's kind of being receptive and just being open to because what you need is known to the divine.
Yeah.
And so more than what you think you need. So
every now and then I kind of just look into wherever and say, "You've got to be kidding me."
Yeah.
But
I know. Yeah.
And there are moments when all I hear is laughter on the other side, which is not helpful. But in a way it is.
Well,
the
divine has a sense of humor.
And that's really important for people to understand. There is humor and laughter and joy along
in the universe, for sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Please.
A lot of humor. A lot of humor. Yes. In a joyful way. In a joyful way. Yeah.
But it's there, and when I hear those chuckles, it's like, all right, I understand, I guess, but really, and this guy's just like, you got to be kidding me. But it's such a pleasure to just open up and let it sink into you, and then when you're done and you open your eyes and you have those aha moments and like, oh my gosh, that was so easy. Why didn't I see that before? So I've got us cranking down to the last couple of minutes. If people want to get a hold of you, if they want to learn more about you, how do they go about that?
Well, I have a website for my organization, which is the organization, again, is the Global Peace Initiative of Women. And the website is www.gpiw.org. That's GPIW for the Global Peace Initiative of Women. And I'm also on Facebook as personally Dena Merriam, and also the Global Peace Initiative of Women is on Facebook and Twitter and all of that. And we have, in addition to my books, we have many programs. We're doing a lot of work on ecology now, bringing together people to talk about this shift in consciousness, falling in love with the earth again. And so we focus a lot on that, just that, falling in love again with the earth.
And of course your books are on Amazon too.
And the books are on Amazon. They're on Kindle, and so you can just get either My Journey Through Time on Amazon, or the latest, The Untold Story of Sita. And I'm working on another book, which I hope will be out sometime next year.
Oh, yay. So we're going to get a chance to talk again.
Yep. Well, yeah. Yeah, I've got
if
two
not
books.
Before.
Plenty. If not before, yeah. I really enjoyed this, Barbara. It was a wonderful. We really had enough time to get in depth, which is not so common in many of these interviews. We were able to cover a lot of important issues relating to this journey called life.
Yeah, it's a real heck of a journey, that's for sure. I want to thank you again. You, as always, have been phenomenal, and it's such a pleasure to share time with you and to talk. And it's so much more fun to not be given questions, to just let
right.
it flow.
Yes, just to let the conversation unfold.
Yes. So thank you again, and thank you everybody for listening. And if you've enjoyed this, check out the YouTube channel and subscribe, because we are still looking for more subscribers. Good night now, everybody, and thanks so much. It's been a joy.
Good night, Barbara. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.